May 28th through the 30th in historic Piedmont Park. My name is Ray Corneilius, host of WCLK's Upfront Inside Atlantis Entertainment Industry. And it gives me great pleasure this day to be talking to this music icon, legend, band leader, composer, pianist, NEA jazz master, Mr. Eddie Palmieri. How are you today, sir?
Oh, better than ever, Ray.
Yeah, it looks
On
great
a
to see
beautiful day
you.
like today.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to be talking with you. When they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've got this amazing lineup for this new season," I was on board. And when she told me exactly who I'd be talking to the very first time, I was over the moon. I was really excited to have this opportunity to talk with you. So many awards. You've had an amazing career, over 75 years in the music industry. Am I correct?
Well, for 70 years for sure, I started playing timbales with my uncle El Chino y su alma tropical, which means Chino and his tropical heart. And it was a conjunto with a tres, two guitars. My other uncle played conga, a bongo, trumpet. And when we had enough money, we bought the bass player. And I was 13 playing timbales, but my mother didn't like that at all. She wanted to be playing piano like my brother Charlie, and eventually I went back to the piano.
And I want to talk about that because I want us to go all the way back to you as a kid growing up in the Bronx. Was music your first love? Was that
Oh
the
yeah,
first
yeah,
thing? Yeah.
because my mother arrived in 1925 from Puerto Rico. My father arrived, and these were cargo ships. There were no cruises that brought 6 or 7 families. My father arrived in 1926, the next year, because my grandmother didn't like him and chased him all over Ponce with a broom. Okay, so then he arrived in New York, and they got married, and and my brother was born 1927, Charlie Palmieri, the greatest pianist, and I was born 9 years later. No sister, no brothers. I was like you know, a surprise, a wonderful surprise. I was born 9 years later in 1936.
Wow. And
And
let's talk about.
I was born on 112th Street between Madison and Park in Harlem.
Okay.
But by 5 years old, 6 years old, we moved to the Bronx, which was known as the South Bronx later. But the Bronx was absolutely beautiful in those years. Uh, and I'm talking about, it has to be around 1942, just about the time of World War II, unfortunately. But that's where I was raised. This is where I played stickball to imitate baseball with the rubber balls, a Spalding, and then we used to get the brooms when they were worn out from my mother, for example, or my grandmother, and then take everything off, and then that was our bat to hit the Spalding.
I was going to ask you. You mentioned your late brother Charlie. How influential was he towards your
Oh,
career
he
and
was
towards
my
music?
whole inspiration. He was the greatest pianist ever. I always say that my brother was the pianist, I'm the piano player. And my brother
Mm.
he was already playing professionally at 14 years of age. He died, unfortunately, 60 years young, the heart attack. But I miss him dearly, and and I, I I I constantly go visit him at the cemetery and bring a little bit of Hennessy and pour it over over his grave and everything. Uh, we have a wonderful relationship, my brother and I. He was very funny, and I love humor, so we had great humor together.
Absolutely. I want to talk about, if we can, because when I was doing my research, you played Carnegie Hall at a very young age. Do you remember that night?
Let me put it this way. What happened was, I studied with Miss Margaret Barnes. Miss Margaret Barnes was a concert pianist. She's in the Afro American uh, Negro, the pianist. She was a concert pianist. She was my brother's teacher, and I used to take the train from the Bronx and go to take my lesson with her. Now, what I did play, her studio was in the Carnegie Hall on the 7th floor. That they had uh, studios for ballet, opera, whatever. She had a piano studio, beautiful. She was a great pianist. So I did the Wild Theater next to, connected to Carnegie Hall, and there's where I had they presented me in front of different professors, musical professors, and I got a good mark in that. But I didn't play Carnegie Hall itself. It was the Wild Theater because of Miss Margaret Barnes.
Got it. I want to, if we can, talk about there was a lot of political and social activity and change that was taking place during the 50s and 60s, and just wanted to talk about how that influenced your sound.
Well, I have to go up into going into the '60s because in the '50s I was still, playing timbales. Okay, but when I started my my orchestra, which started in 1961, La Perfecta, then I started to study with a gentleman called Mr. Bob Bianco, and I was with him for 25 years. He took me into the world of Joseph Schillinger, the great mathematician, Russian, that he wrote 12 books in 2 volumes, and the masterpiece is The Mathematical Basis of the Arts. I learned a lot, with Bob. And then he taught me also, he used to teach the Henry George a course it was a pre-course on Fifth Avenue. And that Henry George ran for mayor twice, and he didn't make it, but he wrote a book called Progress and Poverty. And it's one of the most incredible books written. Uh, how is it possible that poverty is the parent of war and crime? And we can never we could get rid of, we could get to the moon, we could pass the moon, whatever it is, but we can't get rid of poverty. There's got to be a reason. So there was like a villain in the plot. Meanwhile, while I was studying there, at the same time, I was playing all the prisons with the young lords. The young lords at that time were in the street. The church that I got married in 116th Street, they took that church over. Felipe Luciano, Yoruba, Mickey Melendez. These are the gentlemen that put the flag around the head of the Statue of Liberty. And then I did a concert to bail him out of jail. Now, I played Sing Sing about 2 or 3 times. I played Lewisburg when they were bringing in the people from the Nixon situation. They were in Lewisburg. I played Rikers Island, I don't know how many times. As a matter of fact, one of the trips to Rikers Island, I'm getting on the boat to go there, and who's on the boat? Dizzy Gillespie.
Oh, wow.
And he's got a camera. And I looked at him and said, Dizzy, what are you doing here? He goes, I'm going to be your MC, baby. I said, no kidding. So we get to the prison. He had a gentleman called Carl Perkins, something like that. Not Perkins, but he used to play an instrument and he played with Dizzy in an orchestra. So he was the musical director of Rikers Island until Rikers Island until someone stole all the instruments. That was the end. Okay. So anyway, I'm gonna go play there because I had a lot of friends in jail. You want to go see. The only way you can see them, so I came with the band. So now here's Dizzy Gillespie. He comes on stage and he says to the audience as they're coming, all the prisoners, they sat down. He came in. He said, before I bring on my Latin soul brother Eddie Palmieri, hey Eddie, have you ever seen such a captive audience? I thought they were gonna kill us, but only Disney could get away with it. But anyway, we played all the prisons, Attica, women's prisons. I did one in Colombia, South America, and it was something that I enjoyed doing and bringing that happiness for whatever moments that we could give the prisoners.
Wow. No, that's I could only. I'm sitting here. I'm trying to hold back because I really want to laugh out loud. But that is hilarious. Him saying that we have a captive.
Have you ever seen such a captive audience? I was ready to I was ready to get off of the piano and run out of the prison.
Wow. Let's talk about your iconic 1971 song "Harlem River Drive." It celebrated
Oh,
50 years last year.
right.
What inspired that song?
That came from the Henry George School and my teacher Bob Bianco. You know, when we start talking about poverty, and see what happens is the way conditions are, everything goes up except wages. And when that happens, we're going to have a problem. A civil war is happening now. The inflation just gets worse. Every year it gets worse. All that was written in Harlem River Drive, and one of the called idle hands. Idle hands would be the super rich that really they have their things and that, but never really do anything that has to do with to erase poverty. So it goes the lyrics. You all know the story how it all began. It took 5 days and then came man. That's the Bible. All the land was free, and so were we. No slavery to lead to poverty. Once you own the land, you own everybody's soul. And there was at one time one book that went out of print. At one time, there were 60 American families that owned all the land in the United States. That's beyond anybody's comprehension. Those books were taken out. The enemy's estate out. I have one called The Wonderful Wealth Machine, and that helped me, that Bob Bianco gave me by a gentleman called Phil Grant. And he explains it very well. That's where I got that poverty is the parent of wars and crime, which will be in my next Harlem River Drive. I'm going to do, and Reverend Al Sharpton is going to do the liner notes.
Wow. It's one of those songs. It's almost like a what's going on.
I call him Big Al.
Yeah. It's one of those songs. It's like a what's going on that just unfortunately it's still very relevant today, even though it was
Oh
done
yeah,
many
yeah.
years
It'll
ago.
always be the same.
Yeah.
It started, and it'll always be the same. The only thing, it gets worse. It's not going to get better. It gets worse,
Yeah.
and that leads to a civil war. Unfortunately, in my opinion. I mean, you you could only right now, families are struggling just to be able to eat.
Hmm.
Forget about paying their medical, you can't afford the medical, you can't afford to buy gas, you can't, they're siphoning gas from other cars. I mean, what we have is this is the richest country in the world, and look what we're doing.
Mm.
So there's something wrong. It's something's wrong, and that something is something that's an investigation which uh, I was very, very blessed to find out, and that's when I did Harlem River Drive.
Yeah.
Then the other gentleman was a Calvin Clash that wrote "Seeds of Life" and "Broken Home," and he died in Sing Sing. That's when I went to play for him in Sing Sing. That's why I recorded in Sing Sing. But when I went there, they moved him to another jail.
Oh wow.
And I played in Sing Sing, and we recorded there 50 years ago yesterday.
Wow. Wow.
50 years ago, I went to Sing Sing
A lot of
and
history.
recorded.
Yeah, a lot of history. I want to transition to now. You turn 85 years old, and
Now, wait a minute.
oh,
35.
35. Okay, okay, okay,
35,
okay.
I'm going to tell you why.
I
I had a trumpet player called Chocolate Amentero. He played with me, Cuban, that taught me that after 50, you got to start counting by one
okay.
again. One, two, three, four. So I'm 35
35. Okay. So
with 50 years of experience behind me.
we'll say that again. So you recently turned 35. And looking at your social media platform, you're not slowing down. Do you
Oh
consider
no, we
artists?
just
Do artists retire?
I have a bass player called Lucas Curtis. Very, very talented, a genius on his own right. He just finished playing a month with Wynton Marsalis because the bass player Carlos Enriquez had what they call a trigger
Okay.
thumb. so he had to get operated. So now Luquez, when I told him that I'm ready to retire, he says, "You can't retire. You're just starting." So that's how it is. I'll never retire. I just got to stay alive to keep pressing and get our music the respect that we have lost, because we have lost a lot of respect. We don't get airplay on commercial radio. We only get airplay on the community radio, and it's very, very sad. When I was a young man playing stickball, all the bodegas were playing Machito and his Afro-Cuban Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez all day long. That was commercial radio. Now you listen to commercial radio, and I don't know, you want to grab one of the samurai swords and take care of business.
I was going to ask you about that because I was looking at some video last night, and you mentioned that you felt that the genre was dying. Do you still feel that way, that because it's not on the commercial stations that
Oh
yeah?
yeah, yeah. It's a disaster. You listen to like the strongest thing called Mega, and what they have. Not only is it a disaster what they're playing, but then when they do play a hardcore salsa number, they have the audacity to they cut it in half and then put something behind it of what they play every day, which it's a disaster. It's just it's such a high degree of a lack of respect that there's nothing to say because they're in control. But it's very, very sad because the youngster, they like myself when I was growing up, I knew what the music was happening. Now the youngsters, they don't know what's happening. They don't know what they don't know the hardcore Latin dance music. Our music comes from Africa. That rhythm comes from Africa, and that rhythm became Afro-Caribbean. Then it became Afro-Cuban, excuse me. Then Afro-Caribbean, all over the world. And that music is exciting and very difficult to play, but exciting to dance, not to put you to sleep.
Absolutely.
And when you put on the commercial radio in Spanish, it's going to put you to sleep. I came up with a story that if you're going out to dance with your lady, to listen to one of those bands that they call, because you see what happens. That has to do with uh, tension and resistance. That comes from the rhythm section. That comes from the rhythm after a piano solo. That rhythm section goes into a primary position, and then that generates so much excitement that when the horns come in, it's a tremendous musical climax. Okay, that doesn't exist because they don't know the form. So what you have is a disaster. You have a young man singing. You have never a piano solo. They have no bass solo, no conga solo, no timbal solo. Everything that you need to give you that tension and resistance for excitement, they have removed that. So I came up with the story. If you're gonna go dance to one of those, companies with your lady, bring two little pillows because you're gonna fall asleep while you're dancing on the dance floor. And I don't care who feels bad about that. It's absolutely
Yeah.
true. Not talking bad about anybody. You see, there's variations that we could, but when variations hurt the essence of the pioneers, that's disturbing to me. That's unacceptable to me. The pioneers that worked so hard starting from Africa, Cuba, that's those are the greatest years of Latin music, and you're just throwing it away like means nothing. How dare you do that?
I wanted to ask you because again, I was looking at your social media platform. You're very active. Do you feel that maybe those platforms are other ways that you can reach the next generation? Because this generation is very digital. They're always on their phones. So do you feel like you're reaching another generation through your social media platforms?
Yeah, when we finally get to either to Venus, Jupiter, or Mars or Neptune, not here, not here. This is nothing. This is just going to be worse. Than this is so bad now that there's nothing to talk about. You know, concerning my genre of playing my music that I play, because I play. my Latin jazz is danceable. See, you have jazz Latin, and then you have Latin jazz. Jazz Latin is just, with you put a conga man there, then you play conga. You play conga, yeah, play conga. Yeah. But the structure, you have to know how to get that structure to be able to get to that tension and resistance. And for us to get to that tension and resistance, all those chordal changes in jazz have to stop, and then we go into tonic and dominant. That's when we synchronize. Then it becomes the most glorious trip, for the dancers. So my Latin jazz is danceable. Whenever you hear, whenever I did Latin jazz, it's not jazz Latin just plain. No, no. There's a structure there, and that structure must be. It must be. It's like an order. There's a book called the Greek, Greek, like from Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. There's a point there about modes. If the mode fits the structure, then it's the structures that we must analyze, and the structures of our dance music must be analyzed. And okay, yeah, just you got me excited, and I hit the thing. I should hit
Yeah.
my head.
Well, no, no. What you're saying is correct. I mean, a lot of the music, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about the BCLK is that we play all of that. We play all of the good stuff. We
That's
play all the good
wonderful.
stuff. We try to bring people back to, like you said, the original music and art form.
They're the
Yeah, absolutely,
pioneers, man.
absolutely.
Like if you don't do that in jazz, you got then we have no
Yeah.
jazz. I mean, jazz. You got to start from Art Tatum, the pianist. You got to go into one after the other. You got to get Monk. You got to get. I mean, Bill Evans, Miles Davis. I mean, Coltrane. I saw the original Coltrane quartet. They were playing in the Birdland when I was playing the Palladium. You just crossed the street and you were right there on a Sunday night, and that's when I became when that's when McCoy Tyner became my mentor because we went there very few people on a Sunday, and then all of a sudden Coltrane sits down. I don't know if he's doing the payroll or he's writing lyrics to Love Supreme because he dies about a year and a half later, something like that. But he leaves McCoy taking a solo that went more than 20 minutes soloing. After a while, I couldn't see his left hand anymore. I mean, right there, he became my mentor. Besides Bill Evans and the other great piano and Bobby Timmons, who was a friend of mine. I mean, I've been very blessed. And then Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea and Thelonious Monk that I met.
I want to talk about that relationship with McCoy Tyner because he passed away during COVID. Uh, let's talk.
We were very
Yeah.
close because we used to do Latin meets jazz in the Village Gate, and he would come down. So that meant that we had two Latin bands, and then the jazz player played with the two bands. One number, two numbers, whatever it is. And uh, I was, as a matter of fact, when I did my I got my the jazz, the jazz, the NEA.
Right, EDA Jazz
It
Master.
was
Okay.
he who gave me. He's the one that gave me my. He was the one that
Okay.
presented me.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
I love him. I love them. I love him very much. I don't use past tense. They're still alive. The body goes, but the spirit is flying around. You know,
I was going to ask, what can the audience that's going to be at the Atlanta Jazz Festival on Sunday, May 29th, when you perform, what can they expect from the Afro Caribbean Septet?
oh, they're gonna hear it. They're gonna see it, hear it, and they're not gonna believe it. Just like that. The gentleman that played bass, his name is Boris Karloff. He's the bass player that was landed up from Russia, and with they're also heading the Charlie Mingus Orchestra. And the reason that he wanted to meet me, then eventually we played together that because he read an article that I wrote that they asked me a question, and I said, I don't guess I'm going to excite you. I know it. So I took many years to know that, and that's where that tension and resistance comes in. Every competition must have that to excite the audience that's either dancing or sitting down. Guaranteed, guaranteed that they're going to hear it, see it, and they're not going to believe it. The musicians are top. They're all young musicians, great musicians, and we come as a unit, as a family, and you can't top that.
You mentioned offline before we started recording that you had written a song, "Noble Cruise," that was inspired by Monk, and it was also inspired by Maiden Voyage. That was actually the very first song that was played here on WCLK was Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage. Can you talk about your relationship with Herbie as well?
Well, sure. Every time we see each other, I go to him as a, "There's the man," and he goes, "No, you the man," because he loves Latin music, and he knows, and he played like with Mongo and Santa Maria and all that. So he knows how difficult it is to comprehend. You see, how this happened is it starts in 711 when the Moors walk into Spain. Okay, finally they walk into Spain. They stay 700 years. But it's the Spaniard that brings the African captive. Because you're a captive when they take you out of your country, the whip turns you into a slave. Look, anybody. That hurts. So when we got here, they brought them to Cuba. And in Cuba, they were allowed their drum. In the United States, they were not allowed the drum. Fear of revolution and communication, the talking drum. So the lament of the captives working with the blues, and that became eventually the classical blues, and that's a fundamental of jazz. But the drum was not allowed. The investment of the drum came from Cuba. So when you put that rhythm section to Latin jazz, you have a very exciting presentation. But you got to know how you're going to handle that. You're not just putting a guy on conga. I'm talking about the rhythm section. I told you have jazz
Latin
Latin,
jazz.
and then you have Latin jazz. Okay.
I love the way you say that. I love the way you put that together. My last question for you. So many people can say a number of things about you, but what do you say is your legacy? What is the legacy of Eddie Palmieri?
Well, all right. That's an easy one. I want to be a great student of music. A great student of music. Preparation is the word. I'll give you an example. Pablo Casals, the greatest cellist in the world from Spain, cellist. The at 92, they gave him an interview, and this was the question, Maestro, why is it that at 92 you keep practicing? And his answer was, I hear progress.
Wow.
And that's me.
Wow. Well, Mr. Eddie Palmieri, thank you so very much for being on In the Tradition today.
Thank you.
No,
You were
thank you.
great,
Thank you
man.
so much.
I'm not gonna tell the name that you messed up in the first one.
Absolutely. Hold on for me.
Okay. Great interview, right?
I apologize. My office mate's phone was going off. So, Brandon, please try to work that out. But again, Mr. Palmieri, we thank you so much for being part of In the Tradition. You're going to be performing at this year's Atlanta Jazz Festival on Sunday evening, May the 29th at 9 p.m. We cannot wait. I really hope that somehow there could be at least one song between you and Herbie. We'd love to be able to see you two on stage together at the same.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it. But tell him, tell him that he will destroy me. I can't allow that to happen.
It would be. I think that would be the performance that everyone would want to see. But no doubt, you're definitely going to bring all the heat on that Sunday evening. And again, we look forward to seeing you at the Atlanta Jazz Festival. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you so
All
very
right.
much, Ray.